Now seeking to improve its revenue and investment potential in Nigeria's MTN as the mobile operator joins others in lobbying for tariff hikes. This comes as MTN Nigeria continues to face financial pressures marked by reports of negative retained earnings and declining total equity. Joining us to unpack this in greater detail is technology correspondent for the Business Day, Mudiwa Gavaza. Mudiwa, always a pleasure. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Loltando.
All right, Mudiwa, maybe we can start off by talking about just how regulated this mobile tariff, part of MTN Nigeria is under the Nigerian government, but also when last Nigeria was able to increase tariffs.
So in essence, mobile operators in Nigeria are not allowed to do anything when it comes to especially increasing prices unless they have the get-go from the Nigerian Communications Commission, that's the NCC. So they can, so what's going on is that right now they're trying to lobby mobile operators in the country, are trying to lobby for increased prices. It's been 11 years since they saw, such action happening. And you can imagine that in an environment where inflation is doing what it's doing and the Naira is doing what it's doing, revenues, have largely come down, across the sector in Nigeria. So this is a push externally by companies like MTN to say, hey, government, can you come to the party? We are doing our bit, but we also need you to help us, so that we can be a little bit more sustainable.
Let's talk about what happens if you can't increase tariffs for 11 years, Mudiwa. Margins remain relatively flat there. Does your profit story start to rely on volumes, being able to bring on that additional extra, MTN and Nigeria consumer?
Well, usually in a situation like that, the biggest thing is just the erosion because of what's happened with the currency, right? Usually you don't see me referring to notes, but I had to bring this thing to be sure, to illustrate the point that we're meaning. MTN is the biggest operator in Nigeria, 77.7 million customers, so huge operation. Nigeria is the biggest telecoms market on the continent, right? So it's a huge market. So quarter after quarter, with the exception of maybe the last couple of quarters because of what's been happening with the Naira, right? We have just been reporting on growth in a country like Nigeria. But overall, your revenues have actually come down. And one of the most startling facts is the fact that you have revenues across the whole sector that have gone down from $6.4 billion, right, in 2019. So across the whole sector, $6.4 billion in 2019. But right now they're sitting, they're expected to be just over $3 billion for 2024. That's the projection for 2024. So less than half of what it was in 2019. This is not to say that there hasn't been growth. This means that you've got all of these factors in the economy working against, your revenue case. Yes, you're growing and all of that stuff, but like I said, that impact against the Naira, that impact around inflation means that if you're basing it on a constant currency like the US dollar, and you're basing your comparison according to the US dollar, then your revenues have actually come down in real terms.
Now, what's also interesting here, Mudiwa, is that MTN is not against the reforms in Nigeria. In fact, they understand why they're necessary in the short term and that it will lead to a better operating environment in the long term. But of course, now they are lobbying for these tariff increases. Let's talk about the other players that they have to be possibly speaking to there to possibly bring this over the line.
So there's a couple of things that are happening. There are two main telecoms bodies, long names that I'm not going to try and say, but there are two main industry bodies that are lobbying right now. So you have the likes of MTN that are speaking through the industry bodies in Nigeria, banding together with other mobile operators. Then on the other side of that equation, you've got the Nigerian Communications Commission that we spoke about. That's the NCC. Obviously, there's a developmental agenda that they are obviously grappling with everything that's going on in Nigeria. If the likes of MTN as a huge company are struggling, then the normal consumer on the ground is truly, going through the most. So that balancing act. But what I did find interesting, because we did speak to MTN CEO, Ralph Mpita, and he said that they see the moves that the Nigerian Central Bank making as being positive, right? Inflation currently sitting at 33%, which is massive. We feel it in South Africa, sitting at, just over 5%. Yeah. Now imagine in a country where it's 33%, that's 6 times, above where we are. So imagine the pressure that people in that country are feeling. But MTN is of the view that the moves by the central bank are headed in the right direction, and their base case is that we won't have the same inflation in the medium term. So they're actually expecting that what's happening is going to actually result in a normalization of the currency, normalization of inflation, so that, when the tariff increases come, because what's tricky about tariff increases is, if you increase tariffs, that's great, but if your inflation is running away, then you're just eating into the margins, right? You're eroding that. But their base case is, okay, fine, we're fighting for an increase, but we don't think inflation is gonna, is gonna come. We think inflation is gonna come down, which means we'll be able to actually be a little bit more sustainable, on that front. And obviously, the key issue, one of the issues that's complained about in Nigeria is service, and operators are saying, hey, if you guys want better service, we must be able to invest, and to invest we need better margins, we need better revenues. Yeah.
But also, I think interesting here, Mudiwa, and I think encouraging to also hear is that MTN isn't looking to run away from this market. They're keen to make it work. They're doing the necessary work, and I think it is important even for the sustainability of a telecoms industry within the sector. Of course, Nigeria makes it worth it. It's a huge market, 77 million, who can walk away. Yeah. But I think what is important here, and maybe to note, is the work then that MTN and some of the other mobile operators within Nigeria at this point are playing in the development of the sector within the country.
True. And when I think about their strategy right now, right, because they have been exiting, the Middle East, because MTN was an Africa, Middle East, type of operation. And it would seem as if they've decided that the headaches that they're going to take on as a group are going to be African headaches. And Nigeria probably being the biggest one because it's the biggest market. And you have a butting of heads with different authorities, whether it's tax authorities, the regulator, because even around all of this stuff, there has been some erosion in subscriber numbers because there are new regulations around, SIM cards and national identities that recently came in. This is just, the part of doing business, in a country like Nigeria. And I think MTN is firm in its belief that they're going to, do what it takes to make that happen. The other piece, these guys are systemically important, hey? 11% of GDP, that's how big telecoms is in Nigeria, and that's not anything to balk at. And they're systemically important to a number of other industries, so they see themselves, having a huge place in that market. They have made a lot of money in Nigeria over the years, so all you need is sort of a normalization for you to return to something like that. And for a company like MTN, where 34% of your business is coming from Nigeria, that is not a market that you just walk away from.
Brilliant. We'll be watching very closely, keen to watch it all unfold. Always a pleasure speaking to you, Mudiwa. That was technology correspondent for Business Day, Mudiwa Gavaza.